Okay, we're going to watch CBC News go from relatively optimistic to sad on election night. Here's a sneak peek of what is to come.
Directly out of Hitler's playbook. This is out of an autocrat playbook.
So if you're watching from America, reminder, CBC is a large Canadian broadcaster, but they had, I think, the most entertaining, the most hysterical election night coverage of all.
Hello, everyone. I'm David Cochran, and we are live in Washington, D.C. for a special edition of Power and Politics. We have reporters staked out across the United States tonight in the crucial battleground state.
Iowa, who would have thought Iowa is maybe leaning possibly towards Kamala Harris? We don't see that in the numbers yet. But what?
Yeah, that did not happen.
What are you thinking about? What are the signals you're getting from the ground?
Well, we have been really excited about the momentum going into Election Day. This has been an unprecedented campaign by every measure. You have a candidate who came in late, who galvanized the hearts and minds and spirits of the American people, got a lot of energy, enthusiasm, created momentum, and kept going. The Harris campaign has not had any gaffes. It's been flawless. And so coming into election...
I can't believe she said that with a straight face. I told you this is going to be entertaining coverage. No gaffes. How about being asked multiple times, like over 5 times, how are you different than Biden? Nothing comes to mind. That's not a gaffe?
Into election night, I think what we're looking at now is that going to translate with women who have needed a permission structure to be able to perhaps vote against their husbands and some of the men in their lives and support Kamala Harris?
This is so weird when people say this, that this like weird fantasy they all created that all these women were going to vote against their husbands and just not tell them. It's very weird, very divisive too, by the way, for a country.
Even though they may be conservative and generally vote Republican. And I think we're going to watch that in the suburbs of Pennsylvania for sure. We're going to see how that plays out in Georgia. We know that black voters matter in Georgia and North Carolina, but I think this election is going to come down to a gender gap, and we're going to see how women play out in states. That'll be surprising.
And white women make up, as I understand it, 30% of the American electorate. That is a huge block. Not a
White women went 53-47 for Trump.
monolith. Not a monolith.
But remember, 57% of women rejected Donald Trump in the last election. And I do believe that now there will be more women rejecting Donald Trump, and certainly white women and white conservative women.
No.
You said that someone said to you, you're from Canada, why do you care? And together you came to the conclusion that, well, when you're in your home and you smell smoke, you stick your head out the window to see if your neighbor's house is burning down. So the neighbors are up to something, and so that's why, as Canadians, we care very deeply to figure out, is something on fire, Rosie?
Yeah, not.
But is this the most polite way to be a Canadian, use a Canadian term? Is that the most polite way to describe the American election? Their house is on fire? I didn't like that. By the way, this clip went pretty viral on X. Lots of Canadians, lots of Americans did not like this as well.
Not yet, but that's what we're watching for with great interest, obviously, in this country. This is, after our federal and provincial elections, the most consequential election for this country, and that's because what is at stake? And what is at stake tonight is something that is more predictable and knowable in the Democratic candidate, and something that is more volatile and unpredictable with the Republican candidate.
But also knowable.
Also knowable. Someone that this particular government managed to negotiate a new NAFTA with and dealt with for 4 years. But it was an all-consuming kind of 4 years in order to try and manage where he was going to go and respond to it, and cope with whomever. And that's certainly what members of the government will tell you. However, they don't know any more than we do what's going to happen tonight. They are anxious to see how this is going to go. If Kamala Harris wins, it is easier. It is easier for Canada because they know that it will be kind of predictable, normal sort of governing. Donald Trump is volatile. That is part of what his strategy is. And
who do you think is better for Canada and Canadians, whether you're American or Canadian watching this, Trump or Kamala?
And I think that becomes problematic for any government, because you have to be able to respond at a moment's notice.
What strikes you most about those numbers?
Well, the fact that it's really early right now. I mean, we're not seeing anything that is super significant because we don't really have the counts in from the urban areas. But one thing that is jumping out at me about Pennsylvania, literally yesterday, I was in Allentown, Pennsylvania, which is in the Lehigh Valley, which is where there are.
As soon as the results started to come in, though, it was advantage Trump from the moment there were results. So if we're not seeing anything, I don't know about that.
A lot of Puerto Ricans. Kamala did a rally there because they really wanted to try to reach out to Latino voters. And what we're seeing today is that the turnout at colleges all across the state, but in the Lehigh Valley in particularly, is huge. And I'm actually, you know, talking to one of my folks there who's an elected official, sits on a local city council, that was just saying that they actually had maybe 78 students turn out in the last election. And now there's a 2.5-hour line going around several blocks, and there's only 4 voting machines there just in his town at the school there. And so Philadelphia has also had a massive turnout. So when you think about who is really banking on turnout, it's always going to be the Democrats, and that ground game of getting voters to the polls on election day really tends to signal that more Democrats are enthusiastic and excited, especially when it comes down to young people and folks in urban areas. And those.
The ground game. This did not work, by the way. Jon Stewart made fun of Democrats about their ground game, knocking on doors, blah, 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 while meanwhile Trump just taking over social media. I think going forward, clearly social media seems to be the winning strategy.
Those are the numbers that we don't have yet. So.
But again, we're talking urban.
So CBC at this moment starts to realize that the election may be getting away from Kamala Harris.
Where Katie Simpson is right now. I want to give you a live look at what is happening at Harris headquarters.
Oh no, Adrian, the vibe has completely changed. About an hour and a half ago, there were dance lines.
I think there's another way to look at that, though, is that polite society, as you say, as well as the economic, kind of behemoths of our world, really, right? When you talk about Fortune 500 companies, they all see the same thing. And it's that the erraticness that I guess some Republicans have decided to stomach and say, oh, his bark isn't, that bad, is actually really, really bad for the economy, which is why pretty much every major economist has said that these threats of these tariffs are going.
The economy was great when Trump was in office, and there was low inflation, essentially no inflation, well below 2%. Ridiculous.
Going to drive up inflation and be horrible for Americans and, everybody, period. And I think that, that's real. So the thing about the.
I think that's real. I don't know why CBC had this woman on. I have no clue who she is, but what was CBC thinking?
This being a real estate developer, right? This kind of attitude is always going to say all kind of crazy things. The truth is that he built a lot of stuff and didn't pay anybody for it, right? And so I think people are really watching that. And
TDS.
I'm going to come back to the gender piece. I think that women are watching that even if they can't say it and talk about it out loud, because there's something about the nasty that isn't really fun anymore. It was kind of, fun to just kind of laugh at the guy who was the reality star that said crazy things. But now it's really consequential, and it's consequential in terms of the United States global relationships, in terms of our trade, and certainly, all that.
How can women not talk about it out loud? Has there ever been a more criticized person in public life than Donald Trump? There's clearly social cover to criticize Trump.
Affects our economy, and that's the thing that's really bubbling up here. That'll be interesting.
I was interested in what you said about some people will be comforted when he's surrounded by someone like Elon Musk. I'm not sure that lands as a comforting thing everywhere.
That's just an embarrassing thing to say as a journalist. Come on. Elon Musk, richest guy in the world, he's not very comforting. What?
Especially, I would think, in the United States with Musk's relationship with defense contracts in the U.S., but also his relationship with Russia and China and connections. That has to be complicated.
Oh, my goodness, man. What does that even mean? That has to be complicated.
Do that in your state.
Let's talk about exactly the question that you're asking is one that I've been catching a lot of heat for answering on air, and we've been talking about this in the last week or two. You're talking about the propaganda campaign and the playbook of Trump. This is not new. This is not surprising. This is directly out of Hitler's playbook. This is out of an autocrat playbook. This is a way to, I mean, the things that Trump has done masterfully, frankly.
Being as hysterical as you can is not analysis. This is, I don't know why CBC like had this person on. Brutal.
Is to get the entire, to get a big part of the population to believe that the game is rigged and to sow distrust in public institutions and the free press. That is a tried and true playbook that we have seen time and time before that has resulted in really disastrous things for society. And that is what's working. And so it's actually quite simple. When you tell a big enough lie over and over and over, people are going to believe it. Even when folks around him, like Rudy Giuliani and others, have literally been found liable for telling those lies that weren't true. The public still believes it, and the whole goal was to erode trust in our public institutions, and it's working. If anything, that's what fake news. I mean, Donald Trump has done that really well. Can't argue with that, right? Okay. And that's it. I mean, this is the thing, is that the ground game, and I'll, constantly repeat, despite the outcome of whatever may end up happening tonight, this has been the most flawlessly executed campaign in modern history, especially given.
By what metric? It's actually been you could argue the opposite. It's been one of the worst campaigns in history, the most amount of money and the biggest amount of debt, I think. That has to be some kind of record. To go into that much debt so quickly is actually quite incredible.
Given how truncated it was. Democrats double down and invest hard in the ground game where it matters and have boots on the ground, have enthusiasm, and get people motivated to move, right? Leave it all on turf. Do the hard work. And it is so anxiety provoking when sometimes that's not enough. When you play the game really well, but you still don't win because that's not enough. And that's because America is divided in the way that it is. And you kind of have, really two camps. What we're not talking about this election cycle much of is the identity politic of it all. But really, that's how Trump started. That's how the Tea Party movement started, then the MAGA movement and Trump.
I have to bring up identity politics every hour. Apparently that's mainstream media's motto.
But there's really a divide around the identity politics of America. And you have this idea of, we're not going back, which is essentially a progressive narrative of inclusion and bringing everybody with us. And then you have this other idea of like, let's make America great and go backwards, where America, essentially the power structure in America was, made up mostly of a certain kind of person, right? There was a white power element to that. And you're seeing that play out in these elections too. And so
they're all just sitting there listening like this is analysis. Is CBC not embarrassed by this? Just every hysterical talking point you can come up with, and then even go to the left of that, and people at CBC are just sitting there like, interesting.
I do think that we're at a tipping point where it's going to be like really, really tight for a while, and it's going to be an even deeper struggle. And I would say that the Democrats have a lot more exhaustion around it and anxiety because we put so much into it tactically. We're not just sitting around talking trash about it. We're actually out there doing it. I think also, then I'll speak for myself, and certainly not all Democrats, but there's also some.
Oh, now you're going to say something wild. Come on.
Something to a little bit of pride in that, and that when you lose, we don't need to storm the Capitol because we know we put it on the line and we did the work. And sometimes it's not enough, but you do the work, right? We don't need to go and try to steal it.
I didn't storm the Capitol.
Oh, no, I was about to say that.
No, you didn't storm the Capitol, but he didn't storm the Capitol. Yeah.
Where were we?
If he is leading in the popular vote, something's working, certainly with him, with Americans. Something is resonating. Is it authenticity? Is it he is who he is, that he talks like Americans talk and he connects with them? What is working?
It's kind of an illusion that we can come up with some kind of aggregation of the decisions of tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people. Why did they all do this? But what we know is at many points in American history, it's been a very close-run thing. It was a close-run thing that the Union would prevail in 1861. It was a close-run thing that the United States would come to the aid of Britain and France and the democratic world in 1940-41. Because those close-run things broke in the right way, I think there may have been a kind of, I mean, my generation of person tended to assume Americans will always do the right thing when the chips are down. And maybe after so many times of doing the right thing in difficult circumstances, maybe the odds are just due for the Americans to do the wrong thing in the right.
Or maybe you specifically are wrong and do not understand. Maybe that.
Circumstances, not to join the Allies in 1940, not to win the Civil War, but for the wrong side to lose for once. Maybe it was their turn.
Okay.
It's such a bizarre comparison anyway. And then there's also the fact that he already was president for 4 years. Come on.
Networks have made a projection, which means CBC News is now ready to make a call. And that is that Donald Trump will win North Carolina and its 16 electoral votes.
Look how sad they look. Look, this is Rosemary Barton of CBC. Do they look happy? I don't think so.
But the truth is if you just look at what the Washington Post is showing with the exit polls, you're seeing the breakdown here of the folks that went for Trump who are a little bit older, that used to have that lifestyle. They're over 45. They are also less likely to be college educated, most of them, right? And so
They love throwing that in there. You're not educated. You vote for Trump.
there's a certain populism that he's able to play into, which is really focused on the class dynamics that I don't think the Democrats will ever get right in being able to talk to people.
Yeah, but that's also young people who feel what you're talking about, and that same phenomenon is playing out in this country with our conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Young people who feel that they are never going to get the things that their parents have. They will never own a home. They will go to university. It won't matter. They won't be able to access the things that were there. And I think that, you know, you see with the people that David's talking to at the bar, like that's those people too. And so it's not just a class thing. It's a, where did the fairness go? Where did the fairness of the American society go? Where did that dream go? And I think that that's something that is resonating too.
And some of
It's actually a good point, but then watch this.
us would offer is that it was never actually fair. There was a certain group of people that had access points who are mad because they don't now, while the rest of us never actually had those access points. And that's what's playing out too.
Well, it's why when people talk about...
Again, it just makes it all about her. And like, that's a good point that Rosemary Barton just made there. You don't got to shift it back to the thing you were talking about. It's funny how this entire panel is basically just revolving around this one person and just sitting there agreeing with, yep, okay, you're so great, thank you. So we're getting to the end of the video here. Last couple clips about Pennsylvania.
There, I want to bring in the panel here. Aisha, what do you make of that?
I think that that's the right move. I wouldn't say super too close to call, but there's absolutely no call. And so what is it for her to say at this point? I think that, you know, we all said we weren't going to have anything definitive, at least tonight, going into tomorrow. And that's what it's going to be. Numbers are coming in, though, from Pennsylvania. And I think that the last thing that I saw is that there's more votes coming out of Philly that aren't going to drop until the morning. So that's probably part of this, is the text I just got.
So, sorry, can you explain that again?
I think last time I looked, it was something like 80% of the vote was counted in from Philadelphia, which is the largest metropolis in the state, and that there's no expectation that there will be more reported tonight, and that it will be in the morning when the rest of that comes through. So that might also be what they're getting, at least from election officials, in terms of how the count is going. I think that Erie, actually, they said that Erie is mostly in, so that's over 90% that's in, but I know they're waiting for Philadelphia and I think some other counties too.
So you're looking, as you...
So it sounds like she doesn't think Pennsylvania is going to be called during the night. Let's see what happens there.
Good terms.
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt you here for a moment. We have a call to make, and it is a state call, and it is a projection that CBC News is ready to make a call for Donald Trump in the great state of Pennsylvania. That means a whopping 19 electoral votes, that pushing him so much closer to winning the 2024 election. Pennsylvania.
Well, that analysis didn't really play out. Just about an hour and a bit later, Pennsylvania is called.
Is Donald Trump going to do to quote unquote unite America because 48% of the people can't stand him? And what is he going to do to reach across and to develop an agenda that feels inclusive? That's really the question at hand, and it's something that he's never done.
All right, Ian, I know.
So again, I'm really not sure why CBC had that individual on. I think it was pretty irresponsible. all night long. She said wild things, many of them I would classify as divisive.
I know you have no more numbers, but I also know you have a whole bunch of thoughts.
Well, I was just thinking, for all the study, for all the polling, for all the smart expert analysis, this is at least the third straight presidential election where we, around this time of the night or early morning, were just flabbergasted by what happened. Well, you're probably not flabbergasted, but I think a lot of people are, and looking at a lot of social media, at least from Canada, people are.
So I'll finish the video here. CBC, much like the major liberal networks, in my opinion, of America, do not understand the plight of middle America. I don't think CBC really understands the average Canadian and the struggles that they're having. I think lately they're trying a little bit, but I think evidenced by this, I would say, poor election panel, they still have a long way to go. So with that said, I'll finish the video here. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Have a great day.